It's been over a decade since the divorce. I don't talk about it much anymore. What's the point? The papers were signed, the promises faded, and the years moved on. Just me and Adrien. I got full custody when he was barely a toddler. Back then he couldn't fall asleep unless his tiny fingers were wrapped around mine. Now he's 17, a junior in high school, nearly a man. Sometimes I still catch myself looking at him and wondering where the time went. When did the little boy with scraped knees and sleepy hugs turn into this tall, quiet, broad-shouldered teenager who barely speaks a full sentence at breakfast? Raising him alone hasn't been easy. I work full-time as a medical assistant at a small clinic downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Just enough to keep the lights on, the fridge full, and tuition covered for that private school I worked so hard to get him into. I've spent so many years making sacrifices that it's become second nature. Skipping new clothes for myself so he could buy cleats for soccer, working weekends while he stayed home alone with leftover spaghetti in the fridge. But I've never regretted a single moment. He's my son, my everything. Lately, though, something's been shifting. Adrien has become more distant, not in the angry, rebellious kind of way, but in a quiet, thoughtful way that I can't quite read. He spends long hours in his room with the door closed, headphones on. At dinner, he stares into his plate more than he speaks. And sometimes, when I catch him glancing at me, there's a look in his eyes I don't recognize, not cold, not unkind, just unreadable. I try to tell myself it's normal. Teenagers are moody, private, messy. They're figuring themselves out. But every now and then he says something that lingers, or looks at me just a second too long. The other night I went into his room to collect his laundry. He was sitting at his desk, sketching something abstract, emotional. When I asked about it, he didn't say much, just shrugged and said, "It's just how I feel sometimes." That answer stayed with me, because Adrien used to tell me everything. Now I feel like I'm watching him from the shore, while he drifts further out into a sea I don't know how to follow him into. I know I raised him well. I know I've been both mother and father for as long as he can remember. But now I wonder if that's enough. I wonder what he's feeling, and if he still sees me the way I see him. Still my boy, still my baby, but growing, changing, quietly becoming someone I don't fully know anymore. It's late afternoon, the kind of gray March day where the light barely filters through the blinds. I've just gotten home from a long shift at the clinic. My feet ache, my scrubs smell faintly of antiseptic, and all I want is a cup of tea and a moment to breathe. The house is quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the distant thump of bass from Adrien's room upstairs. He's been home from school for hours now, probably lost in his music or one of those video games he's gotten into lately. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter and glance at the clock. Dinner won't be for another hour, but I figure I'll check on him, maybe nudge him to come down and help chop vegetables, something we used to do together when he was younger. I climb the stairs, my steps soft on the worn carpet, and pause outside his door. The music's louder here, a pulsing rhythm I don't recognize. I knock once, twice, but there's no answer. Typical. He probably can't hear me over the noise. "Adrien?" I call, raising my voice a little. Still nothing. With a small sigh, I turn the knob and push the door open, just a crack at first, enough to peek in and make sure he's okay. That's when I see him. He's on his bed, back against the headboard, headphones slung around his neck now, the cord trailing down his chest. His eyes are half closed, his breathing uneven, and his hand, oh God, his hand, is moving beneath the waistband of his sweatpants. The sketchbook he's always doodling in lies open beside him, pages splayed, but I can't make out what's on them from here. My stomach lurches, a mix of shock and heat rushing to my face. I freeze, the door still only partway open, my hand gripping the knob so tight my knuckles ache. He doesn't see me, not yet. His head tilts back slightly, lips parting, And there's this look on his face, raw, unguarded, almost vulnerable, that I've never seen before. My heart pounds in my chest, loud enough that I'm sure he'll hear it, but he doesn't. He's lost in whatever's happening in his head, in his body. I should move. I should close the door, walk away, pretend this never happened. He's 17. This is normal, isn't it? Boys his age, they do this. They're private about it. I know that. I've read the parenting books, had the awkward talks with him years ago about bodies and boundaries, but knowing it in theory and seeing it, walking in on it, are two different things. My throat tightens. I take a step back, meaning to retreat, but the floorboard creaks under my weight. His eyes snap open, locking onto mine in an instant. The air between us shifts, heavy and electric. His face flushes red, a stark contrast to the pale gray of his hoodie, and his hand jerks out of his pants, fumbling to pull the blanket over himself. "Mom!" His voice cracks, sharp with panic. What are you doing?" I knocked," I stammer, my own voice shaky, barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I was just checking on you." He stares at me, wide-eyed, chest heaving. The music still thumps faintly from his headphones, filling the silence that stretches too long. I feel like I've trespassed, like I've stumbled into something I was never meant to see. And that look in his eyes, it's back. That unreadable thing I've noticed lately. But now it's mixed with shame and something else I can't place. "I'm sorry," I say quickly, stepping back fully into the hall. I'll leave you alone. Dinner's soon, okay?" He doesn't respond, just nods once, jerky and quick, before turning his head away, staring at the wall like he wishes it would swallow him whole. I pull the door shut, my hands trembling, and stand there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Downstairs, I grip the edge of the kitchen counter, the cold linoleum grounding me as my mind races. He's my son, my boy. But he's not a little kid anymore. He's growing into a man with a life and thoughts and feelings I can't always reach. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to talk to him about this, or if I even should. The kettle whistles shrill and insistent, pulling me out of my spiral. I pour the water into a mug, watching the steam rise, and wonder how much further he'll drift, and how much longer I'll feel like I'm losing him, one quiet, awkward moment at a time. Dinner that night was a strained affair. I set the table as usual, 2 plates, 2 glasses, a bowl of steaming pasta with marinara sauce I'd thrown together after retreating downstairs. Adrien shuffled in a few minutes later, his hoodie pulled up over his head, eyes fixed on the floor. He muttered a quiet thanks as he sat down, but that was it. No small talk, no questions about my day, just the clink of forks against plates and the hum of the fridge in the background. I tried to act normal, to pretend I hadn't just walked in on him. Tried to push the image of his flushed face and frantic hands out of my mind. "How was school?" I asked, my voice a little too bright, too forced. He shrugged, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "Fine," he said, not looking up. That was all I got. Fine. The word hung there, small and heavy, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap it left behind. We ate in silence after that. Every bite felt like a chore, my throat tight with unspoken words. I kept stealing glances at him, wondering what he was thinking, if he was still mortified, if he hated me for barging in. His expression gave nothing away, just that same quiet, unreadable look I'd been noticing more and more. When he finished, he mumbled something about homework and disappeared back upstairs, leaving me alone with the dishes and my swirling thoughts. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the house settled into its familiar creaks and groans. The scene from earlier played over and over in my head. Adrien on his bed, lost in himself, oblivious to me standing there. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to shake it, but it wouldn't leave. Why was he doing that? Was it just hormones, just a teenage boy being a teenage boy? He's 17 now, practically a man, and he doesn't have a girlfriend. Not that he's ever mentioned one. Maybe that's why. Maybe he's lonely, pent up, with no one to share that part of himself with. I rolled onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter around me. I'd raised him alone, poured everything I had into being enough for him. But maybe it wasn't enough anymore. Maybe he needed something. Someone I couldn't give him. The thought twisted in my chest, sharp and unfamiliar, until exhaustion finally pulled me under and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, Adrien was gone before I even got up, off to school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, the front door clicking shut behind him. I shuffled into the kitchen, made coffee, and tried to focus on the day ahead. But as I stood there, mug in hand, the memory crept back. Him on the bed, the sound of his breathing, the way his eyes had snapped to mine, wide with shock. My stomach flipped, and I set the mug down, suddenly restless. I wandered into the living room, my gaze landing on the old desktop computer in the corner. We'd shared it for years, me for work, him for school projects and games. I don't know what possessed me, but before I could think it through, I was sitting in the creaky chair, the screen flickering to life under my touch. My fingers froze on the mouse, my breath hitching as the screen lit up with images that made my stomach twist and my pulse quicken. It wasn't just X-movie, it was mom-son movie, the kind where older women like me, were tangled in sheets with younger men, their bodies pressed together in ways that crossed the line into taboo and forbidden. My throat tightened, but I couldn't look away. The video played on, the sound low but unmistakable, the moans and whispers filling the room like a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened monitor, wide-eyed and flushed. I should have closed the tab immediately, should have shut it down and pretended I'd never seen it. But my hand stayed still, my body leaning closer as if drawn by some invisible force. The woman on the screen had her hair pinned up, her lips parted as she whispered something to the young man beneath her. My heart pounded harder, my skin prickling with heat. That could be me. That should be me. The thought hit me like a lightning strike, sharp and electric. Adrien, my son. My quiet, distant, sketching-obsessed son, who locked himself in his room for hours and barely met my eyes anymore. He'd been watching this, fantasizing about this, about me. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, my upper breast skin hardening against the fabric of my blouse. I shifted in the chair, my thighs pressing together as warmth pooled low in my belly. I clicked on another video, my fingers trembling slightly. This one was slower, more intimate. The woman, a mother, clearly, ran her hands over her son's chest, her voice soft and coaxing. My breath came faster, my hand drifting to my collarbone, then lower, tracing the curve of my breast through my shirt. I bit my lip, my hips shifting again, the ache between my legs growing sharper. "Oh God," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I glanced at the clock. Adrien wouldn't be home for hours. I had time. Time to explore this forbidden world I'd stumbled into. Time to explore these new, surprising feelings. My hand slipped under my skirt, my fingers brushing against the damp fabric of my panties. I gasped, my eyes fluttering shut momentarily before they snapped open, fixed on the screen. The woman in the video was straddling her son now, her movements slow and deliberate, her face a mask of pure pleasure. My fingers pressed harder, my arousal spiking as I imagined myself in that position. Imagined Adrien beneath me, his hands gripping my hips, his breath hot against my skin. "Adrien," I murmured. My fingers slid under the waistband of my panties. I moaned softly, my hips rocking against my hand as I watched the video, my mind spinning with images of my son, his hands on my body, his mouth on mine, his need pressed against me. The fantasy was intoxicating, dangerous, and I couldn't stop myself from chasing it. That feeling crashed over me suddenly, my body tensing as waves of pleasure rolled through me. I bit down on my lip to stifle the cry that threatened to escape, my hand still moving, drawing out every last shuddering wave. When it finally subsided, I slumped back in the chair, my chest heaving, my skin damp with sweat. For a long moment I just sat there, my mind racing. This wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was a possibility, a game. Adrien loved games. Those strategy ones he'd play online, the ones where he'd map out every move like a chess master. What if I turned this into a real-life game? A series of steps, each one pulling him closer, leading him straight to me, to his final prize. Adrien's sneakers scuffed against the cracked pavement as he trudged up the driveway, his backpack slung over one shoulder, exhausted from a long day of junior year lectures and the lingering awkwardness of last night's dinner. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the front yard, and the house loomed ahead, its windows dark and uninviting. He fished his keys from his pocket, the jingle of metal breaking the quiet. But as he reached the door, he froze. A piece of paper was taped to the wood, fluttering slightly in the breeze. His brow furrowed as he stepped closer, his fingers brushing the edge of the note. The handwriting was unmistakable, his mother's. But it wasn't her usual neat cursive. This was bold, almost theatrical, with flourishes that made it look like something out of one of his fantasy sketchbooks. "Your queen is in another castle," it began, the words curling around an image that made his breath catch in his throat. A photo, grainy but unmistakable, showed his mother, wearing a short silk nightgown, bound and gagged in what looked like a dim concrete room. The fabric clung to her curves, sheer enough to hint at the silhouette beneath, her wrists tied with a thin rope that looped around a metal chair. Adrien's throat went dry, his pulse quickening as his eyes darted back to the text. "Kidnapped by an evil sorceress. Will you rise to the challenge, brave hero?" His heart hammered in his chest, a chaotic mix of confusion and something hot, electric, that coiled low in his stomach. His fingers trembled as they traced the edges of the photo, the grainy image searing itself into his mind. His mother, bound, gagged, her nightgown barely concealing her, her eyes wide and locked on the camera with an expression he couldn't quite read. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the image was vivid, impossible to ignore, and it hit him like a punch to the gut. "It is dangerous to go alone. Take this." The note ended with those words, and his gaze dropped to the object leaning against the door. His custom-made prop sword, the one he'd crafted last summer for a cosplay event, its hilt wrapped in leather and painted to look battle-worn, rested there as if waiting for him. He picked it up, the weight familiar in his hands, but it felt different now, charged with something he couldn't name. Taped to the bottom of the note was an old key, its brass surface tarnished with age. He peeled it off, turning it over in his palm. What the hell was going on? His mind raced, trying to piece it together. Was this a prank? A game? His mom had always had a quirky sense of humor. Little scavenger hunts when he was a kid, notes tucked into his lunchbox. But this was on a whole other level. This was personal, intimate even. He glanced back at the photo, his cheeks burning. The way she looked, vulnerable yet somehow commanding, her body outlined in that flimsy silk, sent a shiver down his spine. He shouldn't be staring. She was his mom. But the image dug into him, stirring something he'd tried to bury. Late nights in his room, headphones on, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows as he scrolled through videos he'd never tell anyone about. Mom and son clips, the forbidden pull he'd felt, the shame he'd shoved down, telling himself it was just curiosity, just a phase. And now this. Her, bound, gagged, waiting. The key felt heavy in his hand, its ridges pressing into his skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. There was purpose behind it. A challenge laid out just for him. And despite the unease twisting in his gut, the voice screaming that this was wrong, that he should crumple the note and pretend he'd never seen it, He couldn't deny the thrill that surged through him. His body betrayed him, heat spreading, his jeans tightening as his mind replayed the image of her tied up, helpless yet somehow in control. He clenched the key tighter, the metal biting into his palm. If this was a game, he was already caught in it. The rules were unclear, the stakes unknown, but the anticipation crackling in the air was undeniable. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. If this was a quest, he'd play it out. He'd always been good at puzzles, at figuring things out. He'd see where this led, no matter how deep it went. He pushed the door open, the hinges creaking softly. The house was silent, the air thick with something unspoken. His footsteps echoed as he stepped inside. The prop sword gripped tightly in one hand, the key clutched in the other. The living room was empty, the kitchen dark, but he could feel it. Something waiting, something pulling him forward. Whatever this was, it wasn't like any game he'd ever played before. And as he stood there, the photo still burning in his mind, he realized he wasn't sure if he wanted to win or if he was already losing himself to it. Adrien stepped into the living room, the door clicking shut behind him. The air buzzed with tension, like the calm before a storm. His eyes widened at the sight before him. Gift boxes were scattered across the furniture, each tied with a ribbon and topped with a photo of his mother, smiling, winking, blowing kisses. A flush crept up his neck. He gripped the prop sword tighter, its weight steadying him as he approached the coffee table. Another note waited there, in her bold, theatrical handwriting. Your next quest item hides in one of these gifts. Open each to claim your prize. Hurry, brave hero, your mother awaits. What was she doing? Had she discovered his secret? The late-night videos, the fantasies he'd buried deep? Panic spiked through him, but it melted into something darker, more thrilling. If she knew, if this was her response. His breath caught, his mind spinning. Was she inviting it? His heart raced, embarrassment tangling with excitement. He set the sword down and reached for the first box, fingers brushing the ribbon. The photo grinned up at him, her eyes glinting mischievously. He untied it, lifting the lid. Empty. The next box showed her winking, lips pursed playfully. His cheeks burned, but a grin tugged at his mouth as he opened it. Nothing again. By the third, he moved faster. This photo was bolder, her tongue teasing the edge of her lip. His pulse quickened, a thrill surging as he tore it open, still empty. The fourth held a shot of her face glowing with pleasure, eyes half closed. He hesitated, throat dry, then ripped it open. Nothing. Box after box through the house, her biting her lip, licking her lips, face twisted in ecstasy, each image more suggestive, until one showed her mouth in an exaggerated O, tongue pressed against her cheek. He laughed, half nervous, half exhilarated. The photos seemed to taunt him now, and he couldn't stop grinning. This game was absurd, intoxicating, and he was all in. He opened the last box. Fingers steady now, empty. Frustration and anticipation twisted in his gut. He'd searched every room but one. His mother's bedroom door loomed ahead, dark and imposing. "Enter if you dare," was scrawled across it in bold red letters, glowing faintly in the dim light. His hand hovered over the knob, trembling. The air crackled, thick with something electric, something forbidden. He swallowed hard, pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, echoing in the silence. Inside, candlelight flickered, shadows writhing on the walls. A figure stood in the center, draped in a flowing black cape, hood shadowing their face. Want to know what Adrien and I did next? Subscribe and comment below if you'd like. Part 2. Thanks for your watching.